Good evening and welcome.
So some that will play into it.
Jesus, Lord.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Onward to the CCJ. I'm Michael Young. Thanking you very much for joining us and for letting us into your communities and into your homes. This evening we're going to continue our discussion that we started earlier today around 12 this morning. We continued speaking about a political discussion and situation in Guyana. Here with me to continue that discussion is Prem Manichan, a member of parliament and former education minister for the People's Progressive Party Civic. I have with me Mr. Hugh Todd, who is a member of the civic component of the party, and Susan Rodriguez, an entrepreneur and youth leader. Welcome to the discussion this evening.
Thank you, Michael.
I trust all of you have had a very packed day. You've been following everything that has been happening, and you're ready to dive into the politics and to deal with the current situation within our country. My first question to you, it's just about 3 hours after the Court of Appeal would have handed down their decision this afternoon with respect to the no confidence motion that was passed in December 2018 on the 21st. What are your thoughts, Ms. Manichan, with respect to the ruling? First of all, I know a lot of persons are excited, a lot of persons are somber, disappointed following the ruling, and they're now looking to their leaders for their take on the events that took place. Leaders,
right. So, Michael, you said earlier that we had a very packed day, and it was indeed very packed. Today we had literally thousands of persons across the country protesting the government. Actively protesting the government. I mean, actually holding placards, not just posting on Facebook and so on, and calling for this government to leave. And the reason for that is because, as you said, there was a no confidence motion that was tabled in the National Assembly in December, where the majority of persons there said that they had no confidence and faith in this present administration. Now, the majority of persons mean the majority of Guyanese, because that's who parliamentarians represent. Last night we were on TV talking about the expiration of the 90 days that the Constitution mandates after no confidence for an election to be held and a new government to be elected. As you know, the present David Granger administration totally they ignored the constitutional provisions, they fooled around with it, and they failed to comply with those laws. So that took a citizen by the name of Christopher Ram, moved the court in the High Court, and then the government went to the High Court also to say that the no confidence motion was not passed. Roxanne George, the Chief Justice, said that it was. She said all of their arguments that were made were knocked down. She said that the majority in the National Assembly of 6 to 5 is 33, which is what voted yes for the motion. She said that although there was the person was a dual citizen who voted for with the opposition, that his vote would count, and she essentially ruled that the no confidence motion was valid and it would be upheld. The government was unsatisfied with that decision. They did not obtain a stay of the decision. They continued in office merrily, carrying on both partying. They had parties and Christmas parties and all kinds of other parties and meetings, and went into the interior and carried goodies, spending the people's money, campaigning, and did all of that between the Chief Justice's ruling and today, while they appealed the matter. So they refused to acknowledge the ruling of the Chief Justice that said they were illegal and unconstitutional, and that the no confidence, they were really just a caretaker government, just there to hold an election. Today, the Court of Appeal ruled. The Court of Appeal is made up of 3 judges. 2 judges overruled the Chief Justice and held that the no confidence motion was not properly passed, only for one reason. They said that 34 would be the majority in a 6 to 5 member house. One of the judges, Justice Rishi Prasad, he dissented and he said absolutely not. 33 is the majority in those circumstances. So what we have is a majority of 2 to 1 saying that 34 out of 6 to 5 is a majority. You asked me how, you said people were sober and people were excited. I can imagine that the government supporters and the government themselves are breathing a deep sigh of relief, because it must have been very, they were like on edge for the last 3 months, running all over the place like headless chicken, trying to get in work that they hadn't done for 3 years. Judges are always wrong. The PPP Civic is going to be appealing this judgment to the Caribbean Court of Justice. In fact, this was one of the main reasons that we joined that court, that regional court, so that we can have an external review of decisions made here. There are many arguments made all across Facebook and social media and publicly, people meeting you on the road and messaging me and so on. Some people hold the view that the judgment is bad, that it is perverse, that it is absolutely ridiculous, it is illogical, it does not make sense, it is irrational. That is the judgment that 34 is a majority in a 65 member house. And some people hold a view, very few, I have to say, hold a view that is good judgment. Now let me say this, we respect the judgment. The PPP Civic will respect the court's judgment. I hold the view that it is illogical, it is wrong, it makes absolutely no sense. And to you out there, my fellow Guyanese, I think I reflect your view. If you have 65 marbles on a table, the majority will be 33. That's just sensible, it's logical, it makes sense. I am afraid that in the reasoning of the judges to arrive at the number 34 as the majority, it made no sense to me, it made no sense to the Guyanese people. That's not to say that we must denigrate these judges, or we must hold them in contempt, or we must dislike them. We have to respect them. They are judges, they have served this country, but they're wrong, and they could be wrong, and judges are wrong all the time, which is why you have the appeal process. We believe that the Caribbean Court of Justice is going to hear this matter. We believe we're going to be able to persuade them that like is said all across the world, including the Commonwealth table and so on, in a house of 65, 33 is the majority. Yeah. The two judges sought to impose the word absolute majority and so on. Nowhere there in the Constitution. The Constitution speaks to a majority of all the elected members present. On the night of the 21st, every single elected member in the National Assembly was present. 33 of them voted in favor of a no confidence motion. That is to say that they had no confidence in the government of Guyana. Immediately thereafter, Moses Nagamutu, along with the entire government members in Parliament, accepted that that was so, that this is how parliamentary democracy works, and they were going to accept this decision and move on, call the elections. The next day, President Granger said the same thing. And then we had Nigel Hughes coming in with this mathematical formula that makes no sense to anyone. We believe that it was, and look, I think you have on the screen the is that the Commonwealth table?
Yes,
that shows you when there are 65 members in a house, what is the majority vote and what's the 2/3 vote. We needed a majority according to our constitution, and the majority says 33, which is what we got.
Okay.
So we will be appealing this. That's why the name of the program is Onward to the CCJ, and we expect that court is going to rule fairly and sensibly, and that will be in our favor, if it's those two words are adjectives that can describe it.
Okay, thank you, Priya. Mr. Todd, your thoughts about the judgment today?
Thank you very much, Michael.
You're welcome.
And thank you to our viewers all across Ghana and those listening by radio overseas and further afield. First of all, I would like to let the people of Ghana understand that we're still in the election mode. The status quo hasn't changed, and we're here continuing the process. So we're as motivated today as we were yesterday and 3 weeks ago, and from December 21st onwards. My understanding is that mathematics is an exact science, but it's also a concept of voodoo maths. So we can go figure which one is at play here today. As Priya said, judges are human beings. They can make mistakes. They can rule oftentimes incorrectly. And while we respect the judge's decision, because we hold them in high respect, and we know that they have a very valuable function in keeping the state together, we disagree with it. But what we want Guyanese to understand is that when you compare our acceptance and our attitude towards the court system in Guyana, you can compare that against the People's National Congress when the CG ruled previously. Now, what we need to get across to the people of Guyana is that this is a process. Coming into this battle, we knew that we would have had 3 rounds to fight. This is the 2nd round. And moving on to the CCJ is the 3rd round. 3 battles to fight, and at the end of it, we will win the war. Now, we have been mobilized. We continue to remain optimistic. We're still in campaign mode. And there's no reason for the government to celebrate. They have been thrown a lifeline, albeit very short, and there will not be enough time and space for them to breathe and to continue to exploit the people of Guyana. As it is, we are going to move swiftly to ensure that we can take this matter further. Now, the good thing about this, and it's an opportunity for us because we now control the process in terms of how we can actually move this process quickly. If you notice what happened with the government after the CJ ruling, is that they were delaying, a lot of delaying tactics. And this is at the expense of the people of Guyana, because time is money. And every day that they lag and they waste and they try to meander around situations, you're costing the people of Guyana, taxpayers. So we now own the process. We're now going to show the people of Guyana how responsible we are. And that is why our record in office is unbeatable. Because we are as a responsible government as we are a responsible opposition. And we have been leading the process continuously to bring every shady decision and every shady act of the government to the front, to let people of Guyana understand that we are there to look after their interests. We're not there only to look after the interests of our supporters. As an opposition, we're there to look after the interests of everyone, every citizen. And we have the opportunity now to move this process speedily by allowing the people of Guyana to understand that we are responsible, we care about them, we understand their needs, and we're going to move this process as quickly as possible. As Priya pointed out, and I want to make this point before I hand over to Susan, Guyana was one of the first countries within CARICOM to sign on to the CCJ. And this is because the PPP understood the political system in Guyana. We knew that we had fragile institutions and the judiciary was very porous. And that is why we took that decision to immediately sign on to the CCJ so we can remove final decisions from the judiciary to the CCJ, which is not in the interest of the PPP, is in the interest of the people of Guyana. And that is why we are confident that we're going to move this process to a body and an institution that can pronounce on give a final pronouncement, which will be in favor of the people of Guyana, because the people of Guyana wanted to remove this government from power, not the PPP. We were just carrying out their wishes, and we're going to see it through, and the people of Guyana will be victorious.
Okay, thank you very much, Todd. Now, Susan joined the discussion. Immediately after the ruling, what were your thoughts as a young person, as an entrepreneur? How did you feel in that moment when you heard the last judge deliver her ruling following, after waiting so long, maybe 2 hours or so, to hear where we would go with this matter?
Good evening, viewers. I was shocked because I thought that the 33-34 argument was the weakest argument, and to to hear that every other argument was upheld except this one, I was shocked. And I want the viewers to understand that Article 1066, both of the judges who ruled that the no confidence motion was not passed, both of them inserted the word absolute majority, and that is missing from our constitution. It simply called for a majority of the elected members. So, having studied constitutional law myself,
Susan has an LLB.
And listening to the judges insert an absolute majority there when that word is expressly left out, that surprised me. But as Priya and Hugh said, we go onward. We always knew that we had 3 rounds, and this is the second round. The government has been thrown a lifeline, and it's a little setback, but we go on, and we will do so as soon as possible. There will be no delay, and I want to encourage our supporters that we're still on the ground. We're still fighting. I'm rejuvenated. I'm ready to go. I'm still energized to go out there and to meet people and to explain to them, because the political climate right now is very confusing. People find it very confusing, especially when you're making a whole lot out of nothing. Like, I have never seen so much being made out of nothing. So this is very unusual, and we have to be out there. We have to keep meeting people. We have to keep explaining to people, and that's fine. That's the reason I joined the party, because I want to share my skills. I want to share my knowledge, and I want to take it forward. And like most young people, I've had a chance to compare. I saw what the PPP government was like. I saw what the APNO AFC coalition was like. I had my chance to compare, and I know that the PPPC government will be better for Guyana, and so I joined this party when they were in opposition, and I vowed that I would work hard, that I would use every fiber of my being to get the PPPC elected back to government, and for us to take Guyana to new heights.
Okay. Well, thank you.
So just to point out, Suzanne, I'm really very happy to hear that, and I just wanted to point out, Suzanne doesn't say these things herself, but Suzanne didn't grow up in a family where her mother is at Freedom House and her father is at Freedom House. Like she said, she's just a young person looking on. She saw both the PPP and the PNC in government and the AFC, and she's a businesswoman, and she knows where her businesses and her life was better, and so she's willing to help put all her efforts to make that better. And we call on all of you. We call on all of you, the judges, both the political parties, fairly and objectively, and we welcome you to come with us. But I wanted to be very clear that we are going to be filing the appeal to the CCJ. By Monday, our lawyers said they'd be ready to file, and we know the other lawyers who are in the matter who were not representing the opposition leader but who had filed their own, like Christopher Ram and so on, they said they'll be ready to file too, their appeals to this matter. And it's a very narrow issue that is being appealed, and that is the 35. So it's all the other arguments have been upheld, but this one thing that the whole of Guyana, all you know, that if you have 65 items, 33 is the bigger half, 33 is the majority. That's the part that's the mathematical part that we are fighting with. And I mean, if it doesn't make sense to you, well, then it doesn't make sense to us, and we have to assume it won't make sense to the CCJ judges right now.
Okay, let's address 2 important issues. First of all, I noticed that everyone here said that the government has been given given some sort of a lifeline. And from the commentary on Facebook and from what was said by the opposition leader, I believe that we need to clarify the issue. Is it the case where we're saying that the government can continue to function as normal, that the PPP is not calling for the government to resign, and that the PPP now feels that the government has the authority to continue in the usual trend? Is that what we're saying when we say that they have been thrown a lifeline and so the party is now in a relaxation mode? Or are we saying that the struggle continues, the fight continues, and that the PPP still holds the position that the government should resign because of their incompetence, and that the government is still bad for Guyana, as bad as they were yesterday and the weeks before that? So I want you to clarify that for us, because I don't want persons to be getting a mixed signal in terms of the messages that we're sending.
So look, let me be very clear. The government is in a bit of a conundrum. And what is that conundrum? When the Chief Justice ruled on the 31st, she said, listen, you all were resigned on the 21st of December. You were automatically resigned. Get out of office. You're only there to hold an election. Don't go campaigning. Don't go carrying on as business as usual, issuing contracts and so on and so on. They didn't bother with that. They ignored it completely. This court says, well, you're legal, which lends a view or lends the interpretation that for a period you weren't legal. So the government is now holding on to this view that, well, the Court of Appeals said it's okay, we're lawful and we're legal and we're constitutional. But that it automatically lends the view that for a period you were not. Except they refused to accept the Chief Justice's ruling, which was never stayed, which was never put on pause, that said they were automatically resigned, that they were just there to carry out an election. They did not heed that ruling at all. They're now holding on to this tightly, and it's all right, they could hold on to it. Yes, last night on the 21st of December, as the Chief Justice said in her ruling, they were automatically resigned until today, until today's date, because only today the Court of Appeal threw them a lifeline. The Court of Appeal was kind to them and threw them a lifeline. Until today, they were automatically resigned, and any contracts and so on issued in that period, because it was never stayed, I would say would be questionable. But today the Court of Appeal said to them that no confidence motion that was passed was not properly passed, because 34 is what is needed as a majority for 65, and so you're occupying office legitimately. And that is, like I said, we disagree with that ruling. We are perturbed, we are perplexed, like every other Guyanese. But it is a ruling we respect, and so yes, they are in office properly as of today until that changes. But I want to say this: it's either going to change at the CCJ or it's going to change when we have the next election in 2020. Elections were always going to be, we hoped, the nation hoped in 2020. I mean, with all the skirmishes that happened with the unilateral appointment to the GCOM chair, where a lot of people are saying that was meant to delay the elections anyway. But this ruling by the Court of Appeal today, this ruling did not say to the people of Guyana that the government served you well. The government still didn't give them services. The government still imposed 200 new taxes. The old people still have to pay VAT on water. Not old people, everybody, on water and electricity. Old people no longer have the waiver of their of water rates. Our children didn't get back their $10,000 grant by this judgment. So what was this judgment about? This judgment was at the center of this judgment was the issue that the people of Guyana had lost confidence in the government, because the government corrupt, because they're incompetent, they were unable to deliver services, they were unable to give people a good life. That has not changed. And that's why I'm saying, Guyana, don't be despondent. Don't be, I don't even bother with these rulings. This CCJ ruling was going to happen. I mean, the Court of Appeal ruling was going to happen. We knew whichever way it went, there was going to be an appeal to the CCJ. But what have we been doing? Ever since the local government election, the PPP has been very, very active on the ground. You could, and on Facebook and on social media and in the newspapers and through the Mirror and through representations on TV and the radio and so on, because we knew that that was our trial run to an election. And what happened in that trial run? 63% of the people who voted said we want the PPP civic. So this decision here today that, and let's be, it was, like I said, Nagamutu accepted it, Granger accepted it, the whole cabinet and the whole parliament, all the backbenchers, front benches, everybody accepted it. And then came Nigel Hughes one Sunday morning and said, well, hold on a second here. You got 33 is not really a majority. And of course, there were many cartoons and many satirical pieces made about him and on the issue of what is a majority. But we have been very clear. We believe that representation came about because of financial interests that have to be protected by some of these people, and so they will make up all kinds of arguments to shift the position, and then depending on which institution hears what, then you might get a favorable ruling, which we have here today. But it's a ruling we're going to respect, and it's one we're going to challenge.
Okay, Mr. Todd, for you, there's a lot of triumphalism on Facebook, a lot of racial slurs being bandied about, people are celebrating, and of course people have the right to do so. How would you respond to that? Is this the time for people to be making all of these attacks, attacking politicians, attacking the PPP, attacking the protesters, and this? So is this the time for that sort of reaction?
What I want to tell the people of Ghana is that there's no reason to celebrate. We're still in a crisis because our political system is broken. It is broken because we have a government that has not delivered, that has failed, and has been failing from the time they took office. Now, the ruling today does not confer on the government any amount of substance. That is to say, now this government is competent, they will deliver, and they will look after the people of Ghana. That is not what the ruling is about. The ruling is purely based on law. And might I say, math, voodoo math being applied. So we won on law and we lost on addition. So there's no reason to celebrate. There's nothing to celebrate about because the process continues. So we're still in a crisis. We still have to see this to the logical end. And why I don't want supporters of the government to celebrate, because in celebrating now means that you expect the government to remain in office. Because when the CCJ rules, that is the final ruling which we have to accept. So I will ask the government MPs to speak to their supporters, like we're doing, to let them understand that this is no time to celebrate. This is a time to sit back, be humble, be respectful of the rule of law, stop throwing your wicked remarks, and respect each other. Because we're all Guyanese, we have to coexist together in this country. We all have to make this country a better place. We cannot do it alone. And even though we're saying to our supporters and the people of Ghana that this government is incompetent, we still have to compete with them because this is a competition. We're competing with the government because we believe that we're a more capable party to run this country. So it's a competition. The judiciary is an arm of the state that is there to ensure that law is upheld and that we see the smooth functioning of the political system. So there's no reason to be excited. You need to stay calm, you need to be focused, and you need to listen to people who will give you good ideas and allow you to understand what is actually unfolding. It will be very unwise and the responsible of any government MP or any government supporter to see this as a reason to attack persons within the PPP. That is not what this is about. This is a process. Second round of the process, which we're now proceeding onward to the third round. And we're saying that we're confident that when we get to the CCJ, that the capable judges there will finally deliberate on mathematics and use proper mathematics to decide on this matter, on not voodoo maths.
Okay, let's address another issue. Susan Margaret Thatcher had said back in the early 80s and 70s that one of the ways to keep a group galvanized is through pressure groups to continue to fight for what you believe in. Do you believe that there is any what should I say reason, any merit in continuing the protests that we've seen started today in various communities? Would you urge persons to continue to lobby the government to deliver better services over the next couple of months? Should they continue to meet in their little hubs underneath the bottom houses to discuss the political situation? Should they give up and just sit back and wait on the PPP to make the next move, or to wait for another 2 months for the CCJ to rule? What should be the mood of the people from your perspective going forward over the next few weeks?
Well, whenever a government is elected, we don't sit back and wait for 5 years to go put our eggs to vote for them to continue or to leave. Throughout that 5 years, we keep finding different ways of having our voices heard, whether it's through social media or taking to the streets. When the government put VAT on education, for example, I joined the protest. For about 6 weeks, I was in front of Ministry of Education on Dam. So this is a way that you resist when policies are implemented that affect your lives. So there are different ways that you can. We use the word protest, but they're all there are different forms of protest. So whether you go and you peacefully picket, or you post your dissatisfaction on Facebook or on any other form of social media, or you meet in groups in bottom houses and you discuss the issues, this is your right. And this is your way of demanding better services from the government. I mean, we put them there. They're supposed to serve us, and we're supposed to demand that. They don't own the country. They don't own the resources. They don't own the people.
Okay.
So we have a say in how our government is run, regardless of which party is in power. We are Guyanese, and any government that is elected is supposed to serve every citizen of our country, whether you're a supporter of the government or you're a supporter of the opposition. It is your right. Your rights should be protected, and you should find life is supposed to be satisfactory. I want people to compare as well the PPP's reaction to today's ruling versus the reaction that was meted out to the speaker when he refused to reverse the confidence motion, to rule that it was invalidly passed. It was a brutal attack on the speaker the next day, and same thing for the Chief Justice. The next day, soon after she gave her ruling, the attacks were brutal on her, and you will not see that from our side. We've said over and over again that we respect the ruling of the Court of Appeal, and we will exhaust our right to appeal.
Now, Priya, I want to put you in the hot seat just quickly before you go. The quality of legal representation. I see on Facebook and social media they're already attacking Alan Nandlal and PPP. They said you guys were not prepared, you were too proud, you thought that you had this entire situation in a bag. And so they're saying that if you were smart enough, you would have anticipated somehow that the PPP would not win this matter at the Court of Appeal and cannot win this matter at the CCJ, given the fact that there's already speculation out there in the public that one of the persons who has been hired and retained by the Attorney General's chambers may have some sort of influence at that level of the CCJ. How would you respond to those matters? Because I don't know whether or not you see them as important, but for other persons looking on and reading and following, and for the civil society, those matters seem pretty important to us.
Right. You know, I think, so let me be very clear. Your view and everybody else's view, whether it's supportive of me or us or not, is very important to me. It's very important to us. We'd like to hear your view, even if it is one that is diametrically opposed to ours. This matter here, there were no different arguments made in the Court of Appeal that were made in the lower court before Justice George. Same arguments. So if the representation was good enough to give us a judgment in the lower court, then clearly it should have been good enough to give us a judgment in the favorable to us in the CCJ, in the Court of Appeal. I want to be very clear, and I think just from the perspective of a lawyer, every single day, judges make bad decisions. Every single day. And so every single day there are tons of appeals. You don't see it because it's not a big matter going on. It's somebody's division of property that a judge didn't deal with properly. It's somebody's custody matter. It's somebody's land matter. The judges make decisions. Does that make the judge bad? He or she may have been bad in that decision, but perfect in another one. And that's why we have review courts to review decisions. What we expect and demand is that the courts be fair, that they be apolitical, that they be non-partisan, and that they deliver justice to the people of this country. That's what we demand. We are not saying one way or the other that it was or was not delivered here. We don't agree with this judgment, so we're going to challenge it. And in challenging it, we will get the best representation we believe is necessary. That may include, simply because the CCJ is physically based outside of Guyana, it may and most likely will include lawyers, Queen's Senior Counsel from outside of Guyana, including who will be included with our local lawyers, and we believe we'll get the best representation. Now I want to just say to you, people celebrating on Facebook or wherever, I get why you might be happy that there was a judgment in favor of your political party, but what has the judgment given you? Has it given you back your $10,000 that were taken from you? Has it given you back the ability to import agricultural machinery without paying a whole set of VAT? Has it given you back the ability to just be a regular person and benefit from the largesse of this state, or only a small few benefiting? Has it given us back that $300 and something million that was paid to Larry Singh for a house that they said was a drug bond? It hasn't given us any of that back. Has it given you back trust in your government? Because it doesn't give me that back. And let me say, we have a really, really recent example. Yesterday, the government, through its Department of Public Information and its other propagandists, and through, I believe, its Minister of Public Security, was saying that this protest today that was planned by the PPP was going to be, we were going to put people in green shirts, and we were going to cause disruptions and break up the town and beat up people and so on. Did any of that happen? Did any of that happen? Absolutely none of that happened. We do know that there were some special branch guys amongst our midst. We welcome you. We believe they heard our message. We are absolutely sure that now that they have heard our message, they too will be voting for us. But we didn't break up anything. We had the option to walk from outside of OP. In fact, when we went to OP, so terrified is the office of the president that they barricaded from Regent Street, said we can't pass there, and gave no reason for it. So we had to go around to the back. We could have walked from OP to GCOM, and we could have walked down Regent Street, where all the shoppers and all the business owners and all the people working in the stores would have seen 1,000 people who were willing to stand up for their rights. It would have been a big message, a large message. But we had promised and we have maintained that we will never disrupt businesses. We know how hard things are. We know you're not making a lot of money. We're not going to disrupt your business. We're not going to terrify people who are on Regent Street nor the bus parks. And so we went back to the leader of the opposition's office. That, my friends, I'm pointing out, is one lie told to you only yesterday, that we were going to be disruptive today. This judgment by the Court of Appeal doesn't give you back the trust that we lost in the government of Guyana. And so if you feel the need to celebrate, go right ahead. But you choose whether you want to be ugly on Facebook and be calling people names and going back into a very, very prehistoric time of identifying people through the color of their skin or their gender or their sexual status, or if you want to take the conversation a little bit higher and discuss issues. I would recommend that. And I would tell you too that I know what's happening behind the scenes. You have a set of big men and women who are calling themselves ministers and so on, who are telling people what to write, and have young people engaging in this kind of unhealthy, destructive conversation. And I say to them, when they come to you and tell you that, tell them, Mr. Minister, when I see your son writing that on Facebook, then I go write it. When I see your daughter writing that on Facebook under her own name, then I will write it. Until then, don't let them use you.
Okay. If I could just say, I saw some comments on Facebook saying that the PPP must be disappointed that we didn't shut down the town today. Let me just say, that was never our intention. Quite the contrary. We were very proud that today we were able to go and protest peacefully in front of office of the president, and that our children went to school. I sent my children to school this morning. There was no fear that anybody would be breaking down anywhere or burning down anywhere. Our children were in school, shops were open, businesses were open, traffic was flowing. The police did not need to come out in their riot gear. They just stood there and maintained order. And we were able to express our right of peaceful picketing. Everything went on as per normal, as we promised. And then we went home. We did what we went there to do.
Okay.
We achieved our purpose.
And we hope we can be a good example. So when the present government, the APNU, AFC was into opposition, could you please replay the tape of today and learn how to protest peacefully?
Yes.
And one of the things that I wanted to add is that this ruling today does not remove the status of Guyana in terms of how uncertain the environment is. The environment remains uncertain. Business owners will still withhold their monies. Travelers will still be skeptical about traveling, and you'll find that the entire economy will continue to contract because we're still in a process. So don't buy into the government view that everything is back to normal. If it was in such tatters yesterday, it can't be back to normal overnight. It takes a process for development to occur. So what you have to understand is that we're still in that same mode, right? So the ruling does not change that. What you need to do is to now take a good look at the political environment and try to understand your party a bit more. And I'm speaking to both sides, or all three sides, even the AFC, because sometimes we tend to forget that they still exist.
They don't, but they don't. They don't exist. They've lost themselves in the PNC, and that's the problem with
So
them.
instead of being sensational about these issues, try to understand the issues so you can make a better informed decision. Because if you support the government, you have a good opportunity to look at their actions to see if they are consistent with your views and your belief in where Guyana should be. If you don't, you have a good home here in the PPP. We will welcome you with open arms. So take this time to get to understand and know your party better. Youngsters today may not realize, but we're reliving history all over again. What we're going through here is another long fight for freedom. to Guyana. We've done it 28 years in opposition, and we luckily, because the world system has changed, we have a better opportunity to right the wrongs of PNC that is not good for this country. So don't celebrate. Take this time to really zoom in and try to understand your party well so that you can make a good informed decision come elections time. Because I can guarantee you, elections will happen this year. The CCJ will rule in our favor because it's down to basic math. So don't get carried away and don't fall into the trap by being duped by politicians on the other side who would want you to believe that everything is back to normal. Speak to persons on with different views and get to understand. Open your mind. Have a broader understanding of what's going on and the reality of what's going on, and then you'll be able to see clearly where you should be putting and concentrating your efforts.
Okay, let's talk quickly for the last 10 minutes or so that we have about Parliament. People are asking what is going to be the PPP's parliamentary action. Is the PPP going back to Parliament? Will the PPP be engaging the government as normal? Is there going to be some form of resistance while you wait on the CCJ? Priya, what is it? I know the party is going to have its own discussions on the matter over the next few days or so to decide what is going to be the plan of action. What is going to happen? What do you anticipate would happen given your experience with the PPP and in Parliament?
Well, this is very new. Like I said, the decision today, whether you like it or not, what it does is it says that the no confidence motion is not valid, was not validly passed. And so that puts us back into a position of the moment before it was passed, which means that I would expect that we would carry on as per normal. When I say as per normal, there is going to be, I don't think we could avoid people being very suspicious of the government and its ministers now turning up 4 years later. 4 years later, now turning up with jeep loads of ministers and public servants to share out book bags and slippers and so on. Now turning up in your community saying, I want to hear what you have to say, when people couldn't get them at all. People are still suspicious of that. So I suspect strongly that I think an election is in our future soon. But whether it's tomorrow or next month or next year, the people of Guyana will have a decision to make. Who could best look after you? Who could best look after you? Who could best make sure that we look after those 7,000 sugar workers who lost their jobs? Who could best make sure their children continue to access the schools that the PPP built for their education? Who could best manage oil and the resource of oil and the income that will be coming into our country with oil? Who could best lead us on the issue of renewable energy? I mean, we know where we are with that in the world, and the discussion is so intense all across the world. Who has been leading in that? So people are going to, my own view would be that we should use every forum to make people see that we are the better option, and that would include going to Parliament. But that, as I said, it's very new. The party has not met as a party to make those decisions as yet. But I don't think, like I said, for us this is a matter of us heading into an election. From now to the date of the election, we are in election mode. And that's where we want all our supporters to be. And that's where we want all conscious Guyanese to be. Who do you want to vote for? Who could best support you? Who you could question? Have you been able to brackle any of these ministers and ask them questions? Have you been able to say to any of them, I don't agree with this and I don't agree with that? Have they been coming to you in droves? Because anything we did, we had large consultations all across this country in nooks and crannies. When we passed the sex offences legislation, we went all across Guyana and talked to people all over this country about what's best what were the problems they were facing in terms of abuse in their communities, and what they thought would fix those problems. When we wanted to make the LCDS part of our policy and our program for running this country, we consulted widely with people all across this country. The President Jagdeo, had as a standing committee people who were from all over, including people who didn't agree with him and who would write letters in the newspapers about him and his government, sitting around the table to discuss different issues. Sometimes it was crime, sometimes it was the LCDS. When Haiti had her earthquake, it was those people that came together, and we said let's form a national kind of committee to raise funds for our neighbor. So do you see this government doing that? Do you see this government having any kind of stakeholder engagement with anyone, with any interest group? Do you see them listening to anybody? Or do they just barrel down their policies down people's throats? You put VAT on education, never asked anybody how that would be. You put VAT on farm equipment, didn't talk to the farmers about how that would affect them. You change the entire mining structure so that now ministers are the ones who are benefiting from that industry. Small miners are closing down their businesses. So you have a serious decision to make. Don't get distracted. And that decision is which political party, and all of them got their faults. I will be the first to say that. Some of them, in every political party, there might be one or two people you don't like. And that happens whenever you put a collection of people together. There'll be one delinquent here, one drunk there, one hoggish person here. There's always these dynamics in any large grouping. But which political party you believe could make your life better?
No.
And that's the question that has to be
our final 5 minutes. Opposition leader by Jagdeo has responded following the ruling today. How do you view his response? Do you think he acted responsibly, Todd, Suzanne? And your final words as we wrap up tonight's program and prepare for the second half of the program, Onward to the CCJ.
Yes, I think the opposition leader demonstrated very good leadership in being very proactive in speaking to the nation, not only supporters of the PPP, by letting them know clearly that we respect the decision, even though we don't agree with it. He went into his discussion by laying out the party's position in terms of how we see the judgment. But one of the things that I wanted to leave with the viewers tonight is that what the judiciary did today is to some extent restore democracy, because what you would have seen previously was that the government was basically walking all over the democratic nature and culture of this country. So that lifeline also includes a temporary restoration of democracy, but it would not survive under this government. We need to take back government so that we can really push ahead with consolidating our democratic principles and values. We would not see that under this government. And at the CCJ, when we get the final ruling, we'll be able to move swiftly into elections. Hopefully they don't distort and disobey the ruling, because we never know what to expect when you're dealing with the PNC. And that we can move into elections and let the people again decide, because the status quo remains the same. People are still dissatisfied. The ruling does not remove what happened at the local government election. Those numbers still stand. But at the same time, we're saying, do not get too excited, don't celebrate. Let's focus on get to understand the issues well, listen to both sides, so that you can make a very informed decision when we go into elections.
Thank you, Susan.
So just to echo what my colleagues on the panel said, whether there is an election in 2019 or 2020, there will be an election. And so our work carries on as per normal. Next week we'll be on I'm excited to go out again and meet people. I'm happy to take their questions, to explain to them what took place, what the next step is. And these are our constituents, and we have to be there for them. So I want to urge our supporters, do not be disheartened by what happened today, and do not be distracted. We have to stay focused. We have to fight this government. You want a better life, we all want a better life for ourselves and for our children. So let us not be distracted by this. We'll be on the ground again, we'll be meeting people, and life goes on. We'll be watching the CCJ to see what the ruling will be. Hopefully that will come very soon. But our efforts will still be as if we were in election mode. So we will continue to meet people, continue to spread the good news. I always say the PPP we bring good news, and so our work goes on, and like I said, I have no doubt that whenever the election is held, that we will triumph.
Well, thank you very much, guys, for joining me on this program, Onwards to the CCJ. In the words of Opposition Leader Barrett Jacquio, the struggle continues for a better Guyana, for a more economically sound nation, for a safer and brighter future for all Guyanese, and I'm pretty sure that is the position of the PPP. The discussion continues on the other side of the break when Eddie Lane joins you to talk to more politicians about what's happening in Guyana. I'm Michael Young, thanking you very much for joining us. Do stay with us.
Article 106 of our Constitution says, the Cabinet, including the President, shall resign if the government is defeated by the vote of a majority of all the elected members of the National Assembly on a vote of confidence. That's directly from our Constitution. It says a majority of all the elected members of the National Assembly. Chief Justice Roxanne George gave an extensive ruling at which she explained the concept of the majority. But by all calculations, right-thinking Guyanese would know that the majority of 65 is 33. Yet today, we saw Justice Cummings and Justice Gregory ruling to overturn the ruling of the Chief Justice, and they deemed that the majority of 65 is 34. No strange logic, no mathematics, strange mathematics can change what is in the Constitution. The Constitution says a majority of all the elected members of the National Assembly, and there are 65 of them, and therefore the majority has to be 33. There was widespread acknowledgement of this in Guyana by President Granger himself in 2014, by Carl Greenwich, in the public domain by Nigel Hughes and many others who were arguing for a vote of no confidence in 2014 when they had 33 seats in the National Assembly. Just recently, before the passage of the no confidence motion, the government, in the form of Nagamutu and Amnali, even on the day of the no confidence vote, argued they had the majority to defeat the no confidence vote. That is 33. After the no confidence vote, they accepted the results of it, and they said there would be early elections. And now they have had second thoughts, and they have gone to the court to challenge this. We believe that this matter will be resolved definitively in the Caribbean Court of Justice, and so we shall appeal this ruling almost immediately. The good thing about this ruling is that it allows us to move swiftly to the Caribbean Court of Justice. Now, many people would believe that this is a setback. And I want to address them directly. We will continue to remain mobilized. We will continue to work every single day to ensure that people across Guyana know of the nature of this government. They have witnessed in the past few weeks when the Chief Justice ruled, and there was no stay to that ruling, that the government continued to act with impunity and we're saying that it's business as usual. No doubt they would latch on to this ruling to argue that now they're legal. No doubt they will do that. Although a few weeks ago, when there was another ruling by the Chief Justice which was not stayed, they argued that that ruling did not invalidate the government because the issue had not been definitively heard at the CCJ. And so we will approach the CCJ. We knew there was a huge hurdle to overcome in the Court of Appeal. We have witnessed several decisions, particularly where matters of a political nature are concerned, that the decisions often go against us. They're one with the chairman of the GCOM, the unilateral appointment of the chairman of GCOM, contrary to our constitution and 25 years of practice, that went against us. It's before the CCJ, that will be heard shortly. Secondly, this case, most Guyanese, if this had to be overturned, I thought there would have been some other technicality maybe on the issue of dual citizenship. But we made it clear that 165(2) of the Constitution would validate any vote that a dual citizen may make in the Parliament. I never thought that this issue of 34-31 because is needed now to pass a no confidence vote. It's probably the weakest argument, yet there is a ruling of 2-1 in this nature, and we have to challenge it there. So I want to say to all Guyanese, we have made it clear, we'll be respectful of the ruling of the court. We've always been respectful of rulings of the court. One of the reasons we joined the CCJ is to have this external review. And we hope that we will be able to convince the CCJ, and we think we can, that the no confidence motion has been validly passed and that this strange importation into our constitution of a concept of simple versus absolute majority, when the constitution says the majority of all elected members, that is not enough, or this weird interpretation is not enough to invalidate the vote. So we will continue to argue for GCOM to be prepared for early elections, because there is a great possibility that this adverse ruling could be overturned at the CCJ. And if it's overturned there and they're not prepared, then that would mean further delays in Guyana in conducting elections. So we'll be pressing for GCOM to continue its preparation for early elections. If they prevail there, then simply don't have to go to elections. But if we do prevail, and we think there's a great chance of that happening, then the GCOM must be ready for early elections soon, very soon. We will continue to work across Guyana. I want to thank all of those people who came out today. I think the government got a hint of what is confronting it. They have helped to mobilize support right across the country for the PPP, because people have now been witnessing the true nature of this government, that it is a government that will hang on to power at all costs including making excuses about elections or trying to drag the matter out in court. And therefore the struggle has to be intense to dislodge them. They can't hide forever. Given their track record of mismanagement, the large-scale corruption, the hopelessness in the country, the loss of jobs, the loss of welfare, etc., the outcome is inevitable, and they have seen this. So the elections shall come whenever they come, and once we work hard and we stay mobilized, I don't want a single member of the PVP to be, or our supporters to be demoralized or to stop working. We have to keep working very hard on the ground to make sure that whenever elections come, the outcome is inevitable. And therefore, I urge all of you not to be dejected here. As I said before, we will appeal this matter. We can now move swiftly to the CCJ. They would have delayed it for a very long time in the future, another month or two. Now we can appeal almost instantaneously to have the matter resolved there. So keep mobilized, keep working online, keep working in the communities, keep sharing the flyers, keep reaching out to people, keep going into the communities where we are not strong, APNU strongholds, because people need our support and guidance there too. The kids in South Georgetown, if you talk to them, they'd have no jobs whatsoever. They have absolutely no job. They too would be demoralized to some extent, because many of them said to me, we want early elections, we can't wait to get rid of this government. If you go to Linden, you'll hear the same thing, or in New Amsterdam or any part of the country, even including in the APNU strongholds. So we have to keep working there. We have to keep talking about what we stand for, which is bringing people together, mobilizing them, looking to the future. We would still examine all of the illegalities they have done in the last 3 months whenever the elections are held and whenever the PPP prevails. We know that there are tons of illegalities that were done in breach of the Constitution, in breach of the procurement laws. They've given out contracts to their friends and family, violating all the laws, large-scale transfer of lands, etc. All of those would be investigated. They can hang around for a while, but they can't hide forever. And no matter the outreach that they are doing now, you see them busy every day in every community, they are still worried because they have witnessed that on the ground people just are fed up with them. So don't be demoralized by this. We always knew there was this hurdle. We have witnessed it in the past. There's the hurdle in elements or parts of our court system, but that's one of the reasons why we have an external review now, and we'll move swiftly to address that. Thank you.
Hello there, good evening, and welcome to the second segment of tonight's discussion, Onward to the CCJ. I'm your host, Eddie Lead, and I have with me in studio this evening Ms. Pauline Sukai, Member of Parliament of the People's Progressive Party, Madam Gail Teixeira, she's the Chief Whip of the Opposition of the People's Progressive Party in Parliament, and of course, Attorney at Law, Marcin Sharma. Ladies, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Alright, so I want us to talk first and foremost, I want to hear from you guys today's results. The ruling of the Court of Appeal. You had one judge upholding the Chief Justice's ruling, but then there was a shocker when the two other judges, including the Chancellor, ruled otherwise. I want to start with you, Ms. Sharp.
Thanks, Andy. Well, today the Court of Appeal, in a decision of 2-1, ruled that the no confidence motion that was passed on the 21st of December 2018 actually required a vote of 34 to 31 essentially in order to have been successfully passed. And I take the time to say that in the context that And so what that means is, for the purposes of understanding, the no confidence motion is considered not successfully carried. And by extension, you would have heard, most Ghanaians would have heard that the Attorney General, in giving his after-court statement to the press, would have said that it's business as usual and the government is essentially legal. But we say that in the context that it is so only insofar as the next step is to happen, and that would be the filing of an appeal with the Caribbean Court of Justice.
Ms. Teixeira, your views in terms of first and foremost, the ruling today, and the second part of that question that we have for you is, what is the legal effect of what happened today, bearing in mind the 3 months have expired at midnight, and essentially the government became illegal as a result of not naming a date for elections and not having a 2/3 majority to extend its life?
Well, we left here, I think, around 1:15 this morning. It doesn't seem it was that long ago that we were here, right here, and the government was illegal. And then we had the protest actions throughout the country. Every single region had people marching, picketing, demonstrating. So I think we gave the government a little taste of what we're capable of in terms of mobilizing support for people for defending the Constitution and democracy. And then basically the government was illegal for 16 hours today, until the court ruled and said that 34 is a majority. So what the court did was admit, in a sense, that there was some basis for the confidence motion, and then it overruled and gave it. Two of the judges stated 34 was the majority. Guyanese all over the country right now are just their heads are spinning. It's true. How could this happen? And people can't understand how 34 could be a majority of 65. And in fact, I work with a parliament document called Table for Determining Majority and 2/3 Vote, and it says very clearly the number of votes, if there's 65, you would have to have a majority of 33. And so this is a guideline that's used for parliament in terms of their voting. What the Chief Justice made very clear, and it's rather interesting when you listen to the judges speak today. The Chief Justice very carefully made it very clear that the word absolute... Chief Justice ruling of January 31st made it very clear that the words absolute and simple majority did not exist in our Constitution. And so she dealt with that in a detailed manner of that whole issue. And yet it was very interesting when you listen to the three judges speak today, in particular the Chancellor and Justice Gregory, that this became a big issue of absolute and simple majority, absolute and simple majority. Our Constitution is very simple. It says in some sections of the Constitution, a vote of all elected members of the National Assembly, which means that if there's 65, then it's a majority of that number, whether all 65 are present or not. So you could have had on the night of December 21st, 60 people present, but you would still have required, in our view, to have had 33. And now with this ruling, it's 34. Then the other parts of the Constitution talk about the issue of a majority of members present, which means that 40 people out of 65 turn out and a bill is passed, and it's 21 of the 40. That in the Parliament, this has been norms and conventions and procedures that have been in the Parliament from pre-colonial times. This is not anything new introduced after independence. It has been always there to do with what is considered a majority, when certain legislation or the Constitution requires that all elected members, the majority of all elected members, and or whether the number was 45, whether it was 53 at one time, whether it's now 65. and the issue of those who are voting. So what they've done, in a sense, first of all, they threw the Speaker under the bus, as far as I'm concerned. He's gone under the bus because he's the one who recognized that the motion had been validly passed, not just once but twice. He was challenged. And he was, I think he did maybe old maths, because what the judges have done today is new maths of some kind. Maybe 21st century mathematics, certainly not the maths that my generation did. And I'm not a lawyer, so I don't have to worry about these things. But, but the issue was that what is going to happen now is that norms and conventions of Parliament have been really kind of just overthrown by what to me is a very clear political strategy to make sure that the government period of illegality was concluded as quickly as possible. And we've talked on this program and other programs. What was the three-pronged strategy of the government? One, legislature. Get the legislature to reverse the motion. That failed. They then went on a parallel track with GCOM and the courts. They failed in the first round in the court, the January 31st ruling of the Chief Justice. They then proceeded to appeal. And of course in GCOM they succeeded in having nothing been done for 3 months. Just sit on their fannies and did nothing. So that in the interim, they went into an illegal zone, into the zone of illegality. And I believe that the court today, in a very deliberate way, legalized the government once again and made it back legal by this vote, this calculation of the 34. The issue is that when you were looking at all the issues they were appealing, you were trying to figure out, well, what could the court overturn? Could it be the no confidence motion wasn't properly put? Was it the issue of the actual vote? Was it the dual citizenship issue? And then there were these bizarre arguments about resignation and non-resignation and when to resign, and in the discussions that you were listening to. And I don't think any of us, we knew that 50-50, you went in with some trepidation, waiting for the court ruling today. But I don't think any of us felt that this would have been what would have happened. We probably figured the dual citizenship may have been that one or something else and stuff like that. So that what has happened today in the courts from a political point of view and and political in the general sense, not partisan, is that the court has now set a very, I don't know, almost insurmountable challenge for the legislature. When we come to the budget, what will that mean now? Do we need to have 34 vote for the budget, which means that people in the opposition have to vote for the government? Does it mean now that, because they even in their own argumentation of absolute and simple, got the two confused. So it was not clear. And then there was this bizarre argument about whether you could break party lines and whether crossover and whether that one particularly. Absolutely bizarre argumentation, because obviously the court seems to be unaware of what it was reported in the press, that when the Dr. Norton, Minister Association, brought the Committee of Appointment report on increasing the FIU the vehicles of the FIU director and the staff to increase the size, the capacity of their cars, what do you call it? The CCs. And it was put to the House and it was voted against. Greenwich, Ramjatan, who else was it? Jordan. They all abstained, and Gaskin all abstained. And so the bill went boom, just fell. It couldn't go forward because we voted against it and they didn't have enough people. So it was negativized. And so we have to, somehow I think that the disconnect with what this means for the Parliament. And I think we have to explain to people that the government succeeded in holding back GCOM long enough in the hope that the Court of Appeal would come in their favor. And we of course are going to go to the Caribbean Court of Justice to fight this issue.
terms of today's ruling?
Well, I think today's ruling, some people would say it came as a shocker. In my view, under this coalition government, we have been experiencing things that doesn't normally shock us anymore, because the nature of the government is such that they can fashion matters and place it in an order which they would like things to happen. But indeed, allowing the court judgment to indicate or to make a ruling that 3/4 majority of 65, it lends the question to the government itself whether 33 is a majority for them as a government to be in the parliament as the majority. It contradicts them as a government, because 33 members of the government sit in the parliament, 32 on the our opposition side, and they are in the seat of power. Does 33 allow them to be in the seat of power? Because if that is the way they are going to calculate the majority for parliament, then I would also want to say that they are not the majority in parliament currently, with the configuration of the mathematics which they have placed before our people. But moving away from that, I believe that the court has set a precedent that is not only going to affect our country, but it can also be a legal precedent for any other country, maybe in the Caribbean or elsewhere, because many times the legal practitioners and so on, they go to see what are, earlier cases and what precedents it set, and therefore it is quite a weird occurrence, I think, that the court could rule that 34 is the majority for 65 in a odd number parliament. With respect to what is happening now, I will tell you at the political level, our people are not necessarily deflated. We have learned to experience many of the strange things under the APNU AFC government. It's their nature. We, in fact, is very much willing and committed to continue the struggle with respect to keeping our people mobilized. We are, in fact, continuing our work among the population, working to prepare them for the elections, because elections is inevitable. Whether it's 2 months down the line, 6 months down the line, or 8 months down the line, it's inevitable. So we will be continuing the preparation for us to do very well in any upcoming elections. And thereby, I wish to say that it's not necessarily surprising that we had such a ruling when one looks back at the way the government continued to manipulate the processes. You can clearly, I think, MP Gail Teixeira noted that the no confidence motion was challenged a second time. Then the process went to the court. So now that the court has ruled and has declared that the no confidence motion is not valid, then what it means that we will be moving to CCJ. And when we speak about a government that is now legal, there is a chart out there is a position out there now that with the ruling of the court, the government is now back in and very much legal. However, I want to say that we will consider that so long as we are heading to the CCJ, then that illegality for us is still shrouded. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are legal, because we strongly believe that the majority for passage of the no confidence motion is 33. The Constitution, according to, and I support both presenters before me, that the Constitution does not particularly at all mention or has recorded anything to do with simple majority or absolute majority. It speaks about the majority of the elected members in attendance within the parliament, if there's going to be any move and count. So basically, I believe that the government on most of the Guyanese part still remain as an illegal government, and I mean, their position and the court position is that they're reinstated, basically. And I still feel that so long as the matter is in court, they will not be totally that illegal, because we are challenging it. They wanted to continue as business as usual when their matter was in court, and we will hold the position that it still is not business as usual so long as this matter is not resolved. I consider the matter of the no confidence motion, whether it's valid or invalid, not yet resolved. And we will challenge that, and we will ensure that we challenge it to the resolution whereby our people can be hopeful that we will allow the rule of law to be adhered to, and that the breach of our constitution will be so very much exposed that it will go down in record that the AFC government has been one of the biggest breacher of the constitution, or they are not in respect of the constitution which is expected to be the supreme document or law of this land.
All right, I think Marcy want to come in here.
I just wanted to also maybe add some clarity and light on what are the implications of today's decision, especially as it relates to Parliament. Parliament usually dictates its own rules and regulations, its own procedures on how it is and will operate and deal with matters as they see fit. The court is not supposed to interfere with the operations of Parliament, only insofar as Parliament has acted unconstitutionally. Now, what did not come out in today's ruling is that the no confidence motion with the 33-32 vote was unconstitutional. All you had today was a statement from the Court of Appeal that says, in a majority 2-1, that said that in the eyes of the majority, an absolute majority was required to pass the no confidence motion, and that would have been 34. But nowhere in that decision was there any reference that the Parliament, in conducting the motion, had acted unconstitutionally, and that is something that one might want to consider, or we might want to consider in the challenge. Another point that was made, Mr. Nandlal, who was the lead attorney in this matter, had in his debriefing to the press had actually said that what today's decision has done is essentially narrowed the issues that were uncertain and in contention down to one, and it's a question of 33 versus 34 versus 33. And so, just for an abundance of caution, let me say that every single point of law that was argued in the lower court, that was ruled upon by the Chief Justice on January 31st, has been affirmed by all three members of the Court of Appeal. So on the principles of law, on the questions of jurisdiction, on the questions of citizenship, on the question of who can bring a motion of confidence or no confidence, and that the terms can be used interchangeably, all of those issues have been ruled or have resulted in a ruling in favor of, in this case, the respondents, and would have been the leader of the opposition for the purposes of the case, and Mr. Christopher Ram. So today's decision has an impact on Parliament moving forward, because now one will have to consider whether every time Parliament makes a decision, whether it's challengeable, and whether the court's interpretation of their action takes precedence over their independence.
Right.
All right.
I think that's a very important point, because I remember in the 10th Parliament, the opposition had one seat more than us, and they went and changed the standing orders to give themselves majority, opposition to give themselves majority in all the parliamentary committees. And Prime Minister Sam Hines went to the court, and the court ruled that this was not their jurisdiction, that the Parliament made its own rules and regulations, and therefore it passed it back to the Parliament to figure out what to do with it. And so it's a very important point you make, and I think it shouldn't be one that's overlooked. And whilst you're right about saying they didn't view that the Parliament is unconstitutional, nevertheless it's going to have some very serious consequences for Parliament, because Parliament will either be second guessing now, have we passed something or not, and they could be challenged. You've now set a precedent that could be challenged in the courts at any time. And it's a fundamental issue that you've raised, because the separation of powers, a critical foundation of democracy is the separation of powers between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. This government, this PNC government, you call it APNO AFC, it's basically unmasked, unclothed, undressed as PNC. The rest is just decoration. And so you have a government that has, in the 11th Parliament, been eking away at the three branches of government that are supposed to be separated, have checks and balances on one another. And so they've been eking away at different things with the judiciary to do with appointments, the Judicial Service Commission, which has expired since September 2017. 2017 still hasn't been appointed. Now I'll tell you right now, in the Committee of Appointment, they haven't even started dealing with it yet. And it's a Committee of Appointment that recommends to the President one or two persons to be appointed. Public service and police service and so on. So that the checks and balances built in the Constitution to do with the three branches of government are being eroded over the last 4 years. This is, to me, a very unhealthy development in terms of what are the basic fundamental principles. You go to the court to interpret the Constitution, but you don't go to the court doesn't tell the legislature, well, you should now calculate your votes in this way, or it should be this amount. And in all the parliaments, all the Commonwealth parliaments, they determine the way in which their regulations, their rules, they uphold the Constitution, the laws, but they set their rules, their standing orders, and their principles of how they do it. And when you go to the standing orders of GAN, it talks about how a decision is made, how a vote is taken. And the vote is taken by a majority. And when there is, and because our Speaker has no vote, not original, not a casting, it says if the votes are tied, the matter dies, it falls, right? So that and different parliaments have different regulations. So I think this is a fundamental oversight, if you want to call it the kindest word, so you're not found in contempt of the court, but it's a major oversight in terms of what they've done in terms of overlapping into the legislature. And fundamentally, the government will be very pleased with this. The problem with the government is that whenever Parliament meets again, and they don't have the 32 supporting them, then what happens?
Or 33.
You know, so yes, of course, you know, because, and just to remind the viewers, because we've said this a couple of times before, in 2014, when they brought the no confidence motion, they had 33, and the motion was never put on the order paper. We had prorogation, we had dissolution, we had elections. When we came with the no confidence motion, tabled it, there was all this banging of the chest and a lot of bravado saying, you know, that bring it on, bring it on. And I remember even the day in Parliament itself, December 21st, Minister Amna Ali and others, you know, was bring it on, and Moses Nagamututu. We have the 33. The 33 was sacrosanct, it was solid. And certainly the point that Roxanne George makes, which is a very interesting point, is that at the time of the vote and the conclusion of the vote, nobody got up and said that this is not a clear majority. It's not it can't be 33. It's got to be 34, 36, whatever you want to make up. And it's a fundamental point. It only became important when the government, I think, realized that their days were over. They had 3 months to hold elections, and they were not going to give up power in that 3 months. They weren't going to go to elections. And in fact, when the history of this whole exercise is written, of this whole experience from November 15th, let's go back a bit more, November 12th, the local government elections, when the government lost the mandate to govern. November 15th, the no confidence motion. December 21st, when it's finally debated, and what's happened today. When that chapter of our country's history is written, it is going to be, I think, a real indictment of the People's National Congress as a party and the APNO-AFC coalition government. Total indictment of what they've done to this country, what they're eroding democracy in this country.
I want to bring you back though to the point that Marcia made, and I think probably some more clarifications. You spoke about the court having the authority to interpret the Constitution, and it probably will rule a ruling that will have an effect if there is something that aligns with an article of the Constitution. So, if you can clarify that some more in the context of today's ruling, which is basically interpreting, and Mr. Shearer spoke about the Parliament itself making its own rules and guidelines that it operates by. Could you give some more clarification?
Sure. The court, or the High Court of Guyana, has a special jurisdiction to consider matters of a constitutional nature. So what that means is if you are uncertain as to the interpretation to be ascribed to a particular provision, then you can move to the High Court and seek clarification. And this doesn't necessarily have anything to do with Parliament. Right. This is just generally, right? And the general approach taken by courts established in case law all through the world has been what we call canons of interpretation. Now, the simplest, we go for the simplest, or our courts should go for the simplest meaning, where you give the clear, direct meaning of the words that are stated in the Constitution. If there's one ambiguity, then it's a simple, plain English meaning. However, if the court were to be presented with a potential anomaly or inconsistency, then they can go beyond the literal meaning to what is called the purposive approach, whereas you look at the overall background to why this provision came into being, what were maybe the debates, the discussions, those are not difficult to get, answers, and so forth. And that helps to guide the decision of the court as to how to interpret what the framers would have wanted. Now, this is important in the context of today's decision because Article 166 speaks to a majority of elected members. There is no use of the word simple or absolute. And this is in the entire Constitution. There's no provision that says a simple majority is required, an absolute majority is required. And so the danger here is when the courts impose an interpretation to a provision of the Constitution, it has ripple effects on not just a particular case before it, but in this consequence, Parliament, in Guyana's context, the legitimizing of an illegal government that was 16 hours ago, as Comrade Gale would have said, was legal. And so it is a responsibility that all courts must approach issues of interpretation with the greatest amount of caution as to the effects, especially in public interest matters as this one is, and what it says about confidence, not only in the judiciary, but generally in systems of democracy in a country.
I want to move you to Mr. Shearer. Where do we go from here in terms of, because clearly the opposition is maintaining its position that the government is illegal. because of the fact that even though the ruling, I think the former Attorney General, Mr. Nanda, would have said some time ago that once the ruling comes beyond the 3 months, then it basically becomes an academic exercise of ruling and should have absolutely no effect on legitimizing the government once the government goes over that 3 months. Where do you go from here?
I think a lot of this is recent. We have to look at it. I mean, the first comments made by the leading opposition was one that we're going to be championing this and taking this to the Caribbean Court of Justice, and that is our right to do, and that is an important issue in terms of whether it could be the 34 could be overruled, and therefore we go back to the illegality, the issue that now they're really in a canoe in the middle, there's a guru in the paddle, because 3 months gone, there's no extension, and they have caused this situation. So for me, the constitutional crisis is kind of like a big cloud hanging over the country. It's just like someone's holding it up temporarily while now you go to the court. So they may feel very happy with themselves that they have achieved what they wanted to achieve from the very beginning. However, it's not all over yet, and that were the Caribbean Court of Justice to rule that it was 33 and not 34, then the issue is then what happens, and I'm not the lawyer, but I would believe I'd have to say that we go back to the issue of the Constitution 106, 107 that says that were resigned to that you have to have elections in 3 months, or you have an extension of the House. And so that's one option that can happen in the Caribbean Court of Justice. The other is that they could rule that 34 is the majority. In the interim, though, what is our action? And one of it is, as Pauline was talking about, is that we continue at it. We continue preparing for elections. It's going to happen. Whether the CCJ rules and says elections should be held in 3 months' time, or whether the government has its way, or the Caribbean Court of Justice goes ahead. This is, in politics you have these, peaks and troughs, and so this is just a little bump we're going through. It's a bumpy road, and it's just a little bump we're going through, and that people mustn't get disillusioned. As Pauline was saying, that we have what is unraveling in this country is one of probably the most interesting from a political science history thing that this is happening. And someone made a comment on one of the programs last night, I think it was, that Burnham, with all his rigging of elections and filling ballot boxes and everything, has always made sure that he fixed the Constitution to make sure it covered him. And so he never tampered with the Constitution because he'd already fixed it by rigging, had 2/3 majority to make sure he was always constitutional. So I mean, it was like how do you call it, that self-fulfilling type of thing. And Hoyt basically did the same thing. But this is the first time where a president of a country has not complied with the Constitution, and actually willfully and knowingly not complied, and used every opportunity, GCOM, the delays in the judiciary, the GCOM, and even the legislature, to try to keep themselves in past the 3 months with no extension, knowing fully well they're taking us into a crisis. So my view is that this is a bump on the road to get to where we want to go to, and that I think that the mood of the people, both you saw footage from Letham and Linden and Mamaroma and Bartica, people that aren't near us here, that show that there's a mood and that they're willing to come out and stuff like that. And so we have to keep working, and we have to, as Mr. Jagdeo said, go back and keep going to the communities, keep talking to people, keep engaging with people, because that is the way that we know this creature we're dealing with. We know the PNC creature. They've gone and had community meetings around the place. People haven't been turning out, and some people are saying, well, how come you come now? You haven't been here for 4 years. Where the devil have you been? And in fact, so dishonest is it that I saw a poster, Pauline knows the area, Parima, where the DPI put up a poster of the Parima school that they were opening with all the children in front and saying this is what Granger did, and Granger opened it. No minister has been in that village from 2015 elections. Not only they not commissioned the school, they haven't been into the village, they haven't been to visit the people. So I don't think that the PNC is going to change its stripes. It's just not, you know. I mean, I know that Mr. Granger likes the Jaguar, and so maybe I shouldn't talk about stripes, I should talk about spots, right? Is that right? So it's not going to change in this period. I think they're going to feel emboldened, and therefore I think we have to be more prepared that we will have other issues and we will have to go back to protest. We will have to go back as we've done today. We showed the police, we showed the world that we can go and have a very lawful, peaceful picketing with several hundreds of people, and nobody broke up nothing, nobody get beat, nothing get loot, and that we are keeping a competent as a party to do that. And that is showing the strength of the PPP.
The fact that the government is basically saying, okay, as a result of this ruling, it's business as usual. What are the risks now, since they have practically given their full powers to award contracts, to sign loans, and all sorts? What are the risks between now and probably a CCJ ruling? You think in terms of state funds?
Okay, Edward, let me take you back not only to this period, but since the AP and UFC coalition government is in a seat, in leadership seat in this country, we have seen that within 3.5 years, they have identified themselves as one of the most corrupt government in the shortest possible time. And we have seen how many times we have pointed out the corrupt nature of the government. In fact, one of the biggest corrupt deal which the parliamentary, not committee, but the parliament dealt with and also established confidently was the drug bond corrupt deal, where parliamentarians on the spot went to verify that the contract and the related matters surrounding the contract and the storage of drugs were verified as not being what the public was told or the parliament was told. And therefore that one instance, even though there are many instances of things, but that one instance was so glaring that anything that happened afterwards, obviously you had to take with a pinch of salt. Within the last 3 months, we know that in December of last year, one of the largest budget was approved in the National Assembly, and despite the no confidence motion came into effect or kicked in December, the government continued to maintain that it's business as usual. So what I believe that we have been doing is that we have been copiously looking at the way they have been operating with respect to awarding of contracts, the use of the procurement process, or not the use but the breach of the procurement process in terms of acquisition of many other matters related to the expenditures of government and the spending of the budget. And therefore, I think what has to happen now is that we have to even put a much more keener eye on their business as usual pronouncement, because within the shortest possible time, within the last 3 months, they have been awarding contracts, and I would probably want to say that without proper tendering system, and they've been in breaches. In fact, there's been the Demerara Harbour Bridge, which we know the feasibility study was improperly awarded, and that is under investigation. In fact, the matter is in court, and therefore there is no guarantee that the government pronouncement that is business as usual will tell us that we will feel comfortable and believe that they which the Guyanese people will expect that they will do it in the right way. So we will have to keep a check on that, and of course we'll also have to remind ourselves that they have also been awarded leases and other matters in a way that we do not believe it is being done in the correct manner. In fact, I understand that large tracts of land is being just awarded to many cronies of the government, hundreds of acres and thousands of acres, and within the shortest possible time, the level of breaches in the way they do business during the period of the no confidence motion does not at all lend itself to guarantee that in this period, up to when an election is finally announced, that they will properly conduct themselves. So for us, I believe that we, in addition to engaging the people, in addition to working politically in the ground, targeting areas where we know we can increase our strength and support, we will also have to direct our attention to the way they are doing business, so as to safeguard the people's interests and to ensure that whatever time they have left, that we ensure that they properly conduct all the arrangements in government to benefit the people.
Sister Shira.
I think that when you look at the economy and what's going on, and you look at the spending spree in the last 3 months, and the state of the economy, the state of our exports, which bring in foreign currency, and so forth, that the government may believe they've had a reprieve by the court today. They may feel very, as usual, they're quite arrogant and puff up their chest. The problem is they haven't tackled the major problems that affect our people in terms of cost of living, quality of their lives. I mean, the fact is that the problem is that they're in their ivory tower, so they don't go to meet the people. They don't see the poverty that is there amongst our people. And so the way in which the spending has been going on, I'm beginning to wonder, and I think some of us have been looking at the spending, that we may reach half year and they've used up the money in the budget and need to come back to Parliament for a supplementary. Now, my lawyer friend here, Marcy, will tell me, is it 34 or 33? No, seriously, which one is it? Because, you know, because they're going to have to come back. I believe very firmly they're going to have to come back for a supplementary. And so they've been spending money like wild, as if money, you know, is they had to finish the 300 billion before, just in case they had elections, you know. And so I think they're going to be in trouble by early up the year. So the struggle doesn't end. This is not the be all and end all. And I think that I think one of the persons who spoke on the earlier panel talked about the fact that despite all the issues and spending enormous money in the court to be able to appeal these cases, and there are rumors of what certain lawyers cost. I won't say those things to put the television station in trouble because we don't have proof of that. But yet they have not been able to bring any relief to the working people of this country, the poor people of this country. They have continued, despite thousands and thousands of people talking about the VAT on essential items, on talking about the tires, banning the used tires, talking about the vehicles, all these licenses and fees that have been increased and so on. This has worsened for our people. At the end of this year, they'll collect, I think it's over $88 billion more in taxes from the people, which means that they're almost, it's almost like, I think we calculated it during the budget debate, it was between 300,000 and 400,000 per family in Guyana, per annum. That money's been extracted from them in a variety of things, the VAT on foodstuff, telephones, internet, etc., water, electricity, transportation costs, etc. So this is about 400,000 dollars from every single family in the country. Obviously, some may pay more, some may pay less, but that's the average. That's not going to change over the next few months. It's not going to change, and there's a possibility it could worsen, no matter what they promise, no matter how they go and promise that they're going to bring this and they're going to bring that and they're going to bring that. They haven't done it in 4 years, and even in 3 months when they were making all the promises that they're going to bring all the goodies, what goodies did they bring? So that other than giving out, as today we saw in the paper, in the 16 hours when they're illegal, they give out 100 mining, is it mining, right? Mining blocks, right? We don't know who to, we have to look and see if they're gazetted. So Polly's right, we got to put them under the microscope even more than before, while we wait for the CCJ ruling, and we also prepare ourselves, prepare our people, that whenever this GCOM thing is sorted out and GCOM gets its act together, which is another issue, that the next time when we have registration, continuous registration, or claims and objection, we go and tell the committee, go get your transfers, go get your ID cards, go get registered. For God's sake, please do it. For your own selves, for your right to vote at free and fair elections. Because what this government has done as of today and this hour has been able to put your right to vote, even though government does not have the mandate. So no matter what the court did today, it hasn't restored the mandate of the government. The mandate of the government was lost on November 12th. It was lost on December 21st. They don't have the mandate to govern this country. What the court has done, but it has not changed that. And therefore we have to be able to make it clear that we need to be ready. Some people lost their birth certificates, they got birth certificates, they don't know where they put it. Some of them don't have birth certificates at all. We need to get ourselves, this is our civic responsibility. When you go to vote, it's your business. We would want you to vote for us, obviously. But we need to get ourselves and be more, to recognize our duty as citizens to do these basic fundamental issues, so that the Mr. Alexanders of this world do not go around and all of a sudden, after the December 21st motion, suddenly discovers that the list is not sanitized and it's bloated, and therefore we need now to have house registration and to stop the election going forward. So we need to put ourselves together and make sure that we are ready for elections at any time, not just GCOM, but us, the people of this country. So this government will not be able to hold our right to vote and to choose a government in this limbo for too long.
Ms. Nadir, I want to give you